In today's episode, during Q&A, we'll answer a question about beadboard on a porch ceiling.
And later, you'll meet talented designer Amy Ilias, who shares the story of renovating her home known as the Lavender Ghost. But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
And you're listening to True Tales from Old Houses. Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Stacy. How are you?
Good, good. You look like you've got a little base tan going there.
Do I look like I have a little glow?
You're back from Mexico. I'm so jealous. How was it?
It was good. Well, it was sweet. I mean, have you ever done an all-inclusive resort?
No, I have not. I did not think it was my thing, and we can talk about that in just a minute. But before we launch into today's episode, I do want to take a moment to thank our Season 12 sponsors, our old friends, The Window Course from Scott Seidler and Sutherland Wells, and our new sponsors, Repaint Studios and Old House Hub, a new online community from My Old House Fix.
Yes, thank you, guys. And if you, the listener, haven't already left a 5-star rating or review for this show, we would love if you would take a few minutes to do that in your podcasting app of choice.
Yes, thank you. That really helps us.
As much as I would like to brag about Mexico, do you have announcements?
Oh, you know I do, Daniel.
Let's do it. Get into it.
I feel like each week I get more and more, but I'll give you the most important ones for this week. And that is that we leave tomorrow, you and I, for Taliesin West in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Woo, woo.
Yeah, very excited. I hope you've packed your sunscreen. You're going to need it.
Yeah, I definitely have packed my stuff.
I was going to say you haven't packed anything, have you?
I pack 20 minutes before leaving for the airport.
Great. Well, if you forget anything, you could just pick it up along the way.
Yeah.
All of you are cordially invited to join us at Sunset and Sips on March 6th. And that is an event at Taliesin West. They do it monthly, I think, at least in good weather. That's the wine tasting. And then they have maybe two spaces open on the property. They don't have a full tour at Sunset and Sips. If you want to do the full tour, then you need to sign up for that separately. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And you can book that directly through Taliesin West. I hope we have some people to say hello to, meet some new friends.
I already heard from one person that they are going to try to make it so, Toby,
really?
If you do not join us, I'll be mad.
Ah, well, that's great. That's great.
Anyway, what else?
The second announcement that I have is that the tickets are indeed on sale for the Wood Window Workshop at Silver Lake that I'm putting on with Brad this summer. Early bird pricing is in effect until April 15th. There are 2 workshops, July 11th through 13th, also July 18th through 20th, and I'm going to link to that in the show notes, but you can book your spot and find out more information at blakehillhouse.com. That's my personal website. Really excited about that workshop. It's the 3rd annual, so we are kind of a well-oiled machine at this point.
Easy.
Yeah, and there is a chance, just FYI, one or both of these weekends could sell out. So if you're interested in doing this, then I would suggest booking sooner versus later. And like I said, there's early bird pricing that's available till April 15th. So why not save some money too?
Yep. Save that spot. What else?
The next announcement is that the Window Preservation Alliance Conference is March 13th through 15th. And I know it's too last minute for people to fly there, but I was thinking if you're local or semi-local, then you might want to attend. You don't have to be a Window Preservation Alliance member to go there. And there's going to be workshops about linseed oil paint, lead paint safety, casement windows. I will be on a panel about social media and mental health. And then Scott Seidler and I are actually going to be presenting the information from our book, The Case for Historic Windows, The Truth About Energy Efficiency in Old Windows. If you're interested in doing that, you can learn more about that event at windowpreservationalliance.org. And then speaking of our book,
yes,
drum roll, please.
Book. I love when you just say, our book.
Our book, yes. It's available now. Scott and I self-published through Amazon, and you can buy it there, but we would actually love it if you would buy it from either Scott or me, because Amazon takes most of the money if you buy it from them. And I am not kidding.
The least surprising news.
Right? Yeah. If you order from Amazon, we make enough, Scott and I, to share a cup of coffee, maybe. Like we can go get 1 black cup of coffee and then pour it into 2 cups and share it.
That sounds charming.
Well, yes, but
What more do you want?
At least we get separate cups, right?
Yeah, the cups are free.
The cups are free, yeah. But if you order it from us, then we can get our own coffee. plus maybe even a sandwich to share. So if that gives you some idea of how much money Amazon takes if you buy it from them. So hopefully I've made that very clear. But the website where you can buy it right now is thecraftsmanstore.com. As soon as I get back from all this travel, then I'll put it on my website at blakehillhouse.com. But Scott's got it on his, I'll have it on mine, and you can have that book in your hot little hands.
And I will.
All right. With all of that out of the way, I do believe we'd have just a minute or two for you to brag about Mexico.
Oh, finally. Well, so, I mean, what do I have to say? We went to a all-inclusive resort near Puerto Morelos, which is about half an hour outside of Cancun.
Oh, okay.
And man, resort life. I don't know.
That's all you got.
It was quite something.
Did you all wear like seersucker and loafers, or is this what kind of resort it is, or what?
I was really upset. So I had like one really cheesy like shirt you might throw on at the beach, and I tried it on before we left. It didn't fit anymore. So I threw that away. And then I just didn't really do the like resort wear thing.
Right.
So there's things to look forward to in the future when we do this again in 30 years. Yeah. All inclusive is weird as a fairly young, childless couple.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Like people watching would be half the vacation for me, would be people watching. So.
Yeah. Although I think you would do the exact same people watching if you just spent a little time in like Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
That's where like everyone was from.
Everybody from Wisconsin. So did you see any cool old buildings? Anything like that?
Oh, well, old. Yeah, very old. We went to Chichen Itza, which is a Mayan ruin.
Oh, that sounds really neat. I'd love to see that. I have never seen the Mayan ruins at all. It's on my list, my travel list. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. The list of rules to get in was long and intense and very funny.
Really? Like what kind of things?
Like specifically, you could have a selfie stick, but you could not have a selfie stick if that selfie stick could also turn into a tripod. And if you did have that, then you could pay like a $6 tax. And you were not allowed specifically to bring dolls.
Oh, okay.
Which I took to mean like, you know, that flat Stanley thing people do, like their kids, from school, and then they take pictures of the same doll in all these different places. I think that's what it might have been about.
I have another theory if you want to hear it.
Oh, I do.
Okay. So I don't know if this is a thing in Mexico. I have no idea. But in Japan, there's a whole, I don't know if you want to call them subculture. I don't even know what you would call them, of these people who have dolls. The dolls themselves are approximately 18 inches high. They're kind of the size of an American Girl doll, if anybody's familiar with that.
I just don't like where this is going at all.
And they take, well, you probably don't know. So most people do very nice things with their dolls, but they pose them in public parks and stuff. They'll dress them all up. They kind of look like anime figures usually.
Okay.
And so this is a whole hobby where people take these dolls out to places like public parks and all kinds of things, and they pose these dolls, and then it's kind of like forced perspective photography.
Like they look really big.
Yeah. So they're doing photo shoots. Well, they look normal size, doing photo shoots with these dolls. So I don't know. Maybe that has something to do. I don't know if that's a thing in Mexico. And I also don't know if there are Japanese tourists that go a lot to Mexico. I don't have enough experience with that to say, but that is a possibility. And that's a real wild one. So sometimes you'll go to these places in Japan and you'll just see people photographing their dolls. It's really wild. And these aren't children. These are like grown adults.
Right. Adults. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times it'll be a couple. So like they'll be, the guy will be photographing and the girl will be posing the dolls or vice versa. So it's like an activity that they enjoy doing together.
I see.
Yes.
Well.
So, anywho, right? Where do we go from here?
I'm barely at a loss for words, but thank you.
Yes. Where do we go? I think we go to commercial. That's where we go.
Perfect plan.
Great. All right. We'll be back. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Window Course. The Window Course, created by Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, is a step-by-step, do-it-yourself program that will teach you, the homeowner, everything you need to know to successfully restore your wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go as fast or as slow as you need, and there are several price points that will fit your needs and budget.
bear with me on this one. Spring is right around the corner. And so now is the perfect time to get ready to restore the windows at your house. Study up with the window course. It has all the information you need all in one place.
And Scott is giving his students a special deal. If you sign up for the Lifetime Access Package or the training package, then you'll get a free infrared paint remover, and that's a $100 value.
Scott is also offering the window course with a money-back guarantee, and he's offering you, True Tales from Old Houses listeners, a special discount. So for 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, which is native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
And unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change. This makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
Now, you used a Sutherland Wells product on your new porch floor. Which one did you use, and did you like it?
I absolutely loved it. I used the exterior polymerized tung oil in medium luster. I did 3 coats. It is absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait to clean it off and see it in the spring.
Sutherland Wells has an entire product line for whatever a person is working on, whether it's siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it. They have a product for it.
So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells. That's WELLES, SutherlandWells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TrueTales.
All right, welcome back, everyone.
And we're back.
Yes, today we are back to normal Q&A, and we have a question from Emily, and she wrote to us through the website. Actually, we've been sitting on this question for a while, so Emily, I'm sorry, we're just now getting to it, but it's a good question. What she has said is, we like to say that we have the best porch in Joplin, Missouri, but the porch has its problems. It features what we think is the original beadboard and what we think is also the original stain.
Oh, cool.
However, one section has sustained what appears to be water damage, and gaps have appeared between the boards, and some of the wood has rotted away. What should we do to repair this? We've tried some expanding foam insulation and even roughed up and stained it to match, but it leaves something to be desired. Is it possible to attain matching replacement material, or is there something else we should consider? All right, first thoughts, Daniel.
Should I skip right over the expanding foam?
You probably should, but I'm taking that to mean that they sprayed the foam in there, then maybe cut it off flush and stained it. So yeah, it's a good stopgap measure.
Yeah, we've seen much worse. Although I understand why that's an unsatisfying solution. I have some ideas, I guess. So without knowing specifically what the beadboard profile is, in my experience, there aren't very many that are common. So it is likely that you'd be able to match it or at least get really close. It is, I would say, unlikely that you'll be able to do that at like a big box store. It took me a really long time to learn this. What is available at a big box store is very different than what's available at a lumberyard, is very different than what's available at like a kind of specifically like woodworking or architectural molding kind of place. Among those options, somebody will have something, I would imagine. An easy way to do it, if you can, is to just have a little scrap, even just like 2-inch little section that you can just bring with you and say, hey, do you have anything that matches this? Or can you order anything that matches this? Because that's also an option a lot of the times. They'll have like a big catalog book and all these different molding profiles. And that's an easy approach.
So can I interject something real quick?
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I found when I was looking for the same profile is that sometimes I found the correct width, but I didn't find the correct thickness. So you could possibly modify that depending on where you need the tongue and groove to line up by actually just putting shim on the back, or you could just add a flat piece of lumber on the back to make it a little thicker so that the tongue and groove line up. That's all I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, thicknesses definitely change over the years. So it's possible you have like 1/2 inch thick. Usually porch ceiling is going to be about 1/2 inch thick. But nowadays that might be closer to 1/4 inch. And so, yeah, you might have to play with depth a little. And to get it to make that seam happen, you're probably going to have to cut off the tongue of the original at just the board that you're butting up to. But luckily, a porch ceiling is not, it doesn't really need to be weather tight. It's not structural. It just is decorative. So you don't need those joints to be super tight. In terms of like matching the stain, that's just going to be a whole trial and error. You will not get it perfect more than likely, but you can probably get pretty close. I would just play with different oil-based stains. I use a lot of Minwax. I have it on my hands right now. It's true. And realistically, it's probably shellac on the original stuff, not something we really use on exterior anymore. So if you wanted to, just to sort of try to match it, you could try that. It will take a very long time for it to age and look the same as what's there. So if it were me, I think I would probably choose a tung oil finish like you could get from Sutherland Wells or something like that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it does. I have a couple of extra thoughts. One thing I had to do last summer was repair. I had to put a patch on my ceiling of the porch. But it turns out that I actually had some of that beadboard in another location on my house. It was all messed up anyway. In a lot of areas, it was going to have to be fixed. So I actually took that beadboard, was the exact same profile, and used it to patch the ceiling. So I don't know anything about your house, Emily, and I don't know how old I know it's old, but I don't know what year it is. Mine's 1885. Restoring Your Historic House, that's the book by Scott Hansen. And he has a really great little section in there about how to patch and fix tongue and groove. So if you have that book already, be sure and check that book for how to repair tongue and groove. If not, there are lots of options for that online to learn how to do that. It's really pretty easy. It's just getting started and ending that are the two things that are probably the most complicated. My suggestion is to choose different lengths so you don't end up with a completely rectangle patch. Place them in there at somewhat different lengths so that to the eye, it doesn't directly go up to a perfect square or a perfect rectangle or whatever. But that's really all I have. Now, I know you have actually created beadboard before. So do you have any recommendations for that? Or who would you suggest they go to if they wanted just a small amount replicated? Because it really is a router bit. It's wood and it's a router bit. And you wouldn't even have to have the actual tongue and groove part. You would just have the bead on the beadboard.
The bead itself, you can order either individual bits or like a bit set that'll have various sizes of beads. One of them, it's probably 1/8 inch is what you have. And it's pretty simple to do if you just need a little bit, depending on your tools and skill level.
I'm thinking if you've got a woodworker friend or if you have a buddy like my friend Dale, who you could ask to mill it for you or put that bead in some wood for you, that's an opportunity there. And if they don't have that bit, then maybe that could be your contribution. You know, if I buy this bit, will you put this bead on these boards for us so that we can patch our ceiling?
There you go.
Yeah.
You just negotiated her entire scope of work.
There you go. There you go. And pizza and beer help too. So anyway. All right. Thank you, Emily, so much for that question. I hope we've given you some things to think about as you face this porch repair project. If you have any additional questions, just reach out to us. If we were unclear, happy to elaborate.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. We're also still looking for questions this season for Q&A. So our favorite way is if you'd leave us a voicemail by hitting the mic icon on the True Tales from Old Houses website. You can also submit the question in writing through the contact form in the same place.
We're also open to follow-up on past episodes. We had 2 people follow up on past episodes from last year, and that was a lot of fun. So if you have expertise or useful information related to topics we've covered before, please reach out and let us know because we would really love to hear from you.
Yes, we would.
All right, we need to take another commercial break, but we'll be back soon.
Okay.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Repaint Studios. Okay, confession time, Daniel. In the past, how did you store your paint tray when you were mid-project?
I will admit, I used cheap plastic liners and then I stored them in the trash can.
Well, you are not going to get any judgment from me because I used a garbage bag and that was an icky, sticky mess. But now I use the repaint tray.
Okay, I do too. So let's spread the word.
Billy, the inventor, knew that this was a problem for so many of us, so she created the solution. And now her woman-owned business is disrupting the paint industry. The repaint tray solves that mid-project paint storage problem. It has a reusable liner, an airtight lid, and it keeps your paint fresh for weeks.
Weeks, like weeks and weeks.
It's like Tupperware, but for your paint tray.
Exactly. And the tray itself, I'd like to note, is super heavy duty metal, so it doesn't slide around or wobble or bend. Plus, when you're done painting, you can just let the paint dry right in that silicone liner, and then you get to peel it out, which is really very satisfying.
The tray, silicone liner, and lid are built to last, which is better for you and the planet. It's the last paint tray you'll ever need, so save those garbage bags for the trash can.
Snag one for yourself at repaintstudios.com.
And for 10% off your order, use our coupon code TrueTales10. That's the number 10. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Old House Hub, brought to you by My Old House Fix. Daniel, I have a question for you, and you can answer for our listeners. Have you ever spent hours scrolling Facebook groups, Reddit threads, obscure websites, and random YouTube videos trying to find answers about your project?
Of course I have. And then half the time I end up on a deep dive where I come out 3 hours later. I know everything about Victorian paint colors, and I still have zero idea how to fix my house.
Exactly. And that is why we are excited to tell everyone about Old House Hub from My Old House Fix.
Yes, we are. It's like your headquarters for all things old house. It's an exclusive online community where you can gather resources, browse archives by topic, connect with fellow enthusiasts, and get expert advice. It's a place to share your passion without getting lost in the endless social media feeds.
And there's no creepy AI algorithm suggesting totally unrelated content. It's just good, meaningful conversations with people who get it. No more scrolling, no more headaches, just connection and answers.
I love that. It's kind of like old school internet for old house lovers. The best part is right now, True Tales from Old Houses listeners can get a 1-year membership to the Old House Hub for free with the coupon code TrueTales.
That great deal is only available during this season of the podcast. When season 12 ends, the deal ends.
So don't wait. Visit oldhousehub.com to join the Old House Hub community for free and finally have a go-to place for all your old house questions, projects, and inspiration.
We're back.
And are you intact? Is your home intact? Are you all right?
It is. The craziest thing just happened. It's been a terrible, terrible winter here, and I had lots of ice on my roof, and this gigantic chunk just fell from the upper roof to the porch roof, and it made so much noise. You and I both jumped out of our seats, didn't we?
Yes, and both shouted a 4-letter word. We're very concerned.
So anyway, let's get back to the real show. And today we have a guest, and I'll let you introduce her.
I would love to. Our guest today is Amy Ilias. When Amy and her husband stumbled upon an eye-catching 1830s Italianate home, she knew that it would pair perfectly with her distinct eye for design and artistic talent.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I'm a designer who lives in the Lavender Ghost.
Hi, Amy.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, gosh, thanks for being here. I sincerely hope that people will go and watch this interview on YouTube because your cat is in the background and it's the cutest thing.
Just a fluff.
Just a little puffball there behind you.
One of my assistants, yeah. Getting hair on everything.
Getting hair on everything like it's her job, right?
It's her job. She's very good at it.
It's nice to meet you. And I guess I need a good starting point. So the Lavender Ghost, that is part of what intrigued me when I saw your username on Instagram. And then I started poking around on your feed, and the pictures were so beautiful. So let's start with your house, I guess. Why the Lavender Ghost, and how did you get there?
We bought the house kind of impulsively. I know that sounds crazy, but we live in Hudson, New York. It's an area that I've loved for decades and always related to. I lost both of my parents shortly before we bought the house, and I felt like I was finally able to. I love them both dearly. They were wonderful people, but in a way, I was free to leave the city. I'm an only child, and I saw them every weekend, and they were very, very important to me. And I just said to Jim one weekend, let's just go up and look at Hudson. We haven't been there for a long time. And I said, can we look at some houses when we're up in Hudson? And I had already been looking at Zillow.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all do that. Even when we have a house of already, Zillow is just the kind of a pastime.
Yeah. And he said, anything but an old Victorian house.
Well, you got an Italianate.
Yeah, right. So we lived in Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn, and we had this old brownstone where, we would he was just like, I don't want plaster moldings and all of that stuff. Because we would walk downstairs in the morning and like the entire ceiling was down in the hallway. And it was just that kind of really old house that we did very piecemeal. So I respected that because he did most of the work. I was just like, I was very good at pointing and saying what needed to be done. And he was very good at actually doing the work. So we tried to look at mostly industrial spaces. He's a painter and he needed a big space for a studio. We had this very, very narrow brownstone, and he had made a studio in every part of that house as we worked on different floors. So we were looking for a place where he could have a large studio. And I had seen this place, but out of respect, I was like, I'm not even going to bring it up. But I had also seen the place and it had like an Indian bed and a bunch of Moroccan rugs. And I was like, there's something about that place. And we were looking at this other place that was industrial. It was all of those things, but it had a ton of problems. And our realtor, who I adore, said, let me go and take you to see some comps. So we went to see this place. And he walked in the door and said, oh my God, could you imagine if this was painted white? Because at that point, it was super dark. The floors were super dark. All the walls were dark. And I was like, yeah. And meanwhile, I'm looking around and I'm like, this is it. This is the house. But I also knew that this was going to be like a huge project for him. And I was still working full time. We talked about it for weeks. And it turned out that the house was owned by Bryce and Helen Martin. They're both wonderful artists. I asked a friend of mine who was a realtor in the city, what to do. It was a little bit more money than we had to spend. And she said, I know Bryce and Helen very well. And I said, no, I don't know that you know Bryce and Helen very well. And she said her mother had sold them their first house and she had sold their last house. And they had owned this house but never lived in it. I think that they were hoping that one of their daughters would want it. So all of like the staging furniture was theirs. The Indian bed, the Moroccan rugs. And I remembered an article about them in the early 2000s about one of their homes. And I was like, this is so familiar to me. I get what they're, if I had Bryce Martin paintings all over the place, this would be my house. It's incredible. It's gorgeous. And so we wrote them a letter and she got it to them. And I wrote to them about how much I love their aesthetic, how much I respected their work, how much we loved the house. And they accepted an offer.
Wow.
Oh, that's so neat.
And when we first saw the house, it was a gray day and it was painted this lavender color that Bryce had chosen. And it almost disappears into the sky. And Jim just said, wow, it's like a ghost ship.
Oh, wow.
And so the ghost ship turned into the Lavender Ghost.
The Lavender Ghost.
That's the long story about how we named our house.
Oh, I love knowing that.
I had no idea. So it's lavender on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had it repainted the same colors because it was pretty worn out.
It's iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
I mean, I'll say, I think this is the first time we've interviewed somebody where I was a fan of their house before I was a fan of them, because I've known your house since before you've owned your house. And it's just an amazing, amazing house. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. So you'll have to go to Instagram to appreciate this, but Amy's style, I would say, is heavily modern. And I mean, I absolutely love it. But I feel like there's a certain philosophy of how to sort of treat the antique home that informs that aesthetic. Does that make sense? In other words, like you've lightened the floors, you've whitened the walls, but I feel like there's no sense of anything like having been taken from the house.
If anything, it allows for your art and for what you love to actually be seen, is what I've noticed. I mean, I've noticed because art is very heavily portrayed in your life. You said your husband is an artist. I think you are a designer. So yeah, I see what you're saying, Daniel, for sure.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think you both get exactly what I tried to do in this. I think it was an incredible privilege to have like a 3-year renovation period where the house was empty.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And Jim he did most of the renovation. And I fell in love with this house empty, and especially once it brightened up and once the floors were light. I would just lie on the floor in the living room and I kind of knew immediately like what the floor plan was going to be in every room. Like that's the easy part for me and like what was going to go where. And it's not like we bought furniture for the house. I bought one thing for the house. The rest of it came from Brooklyn. But I knew I've never lived in a house that had any kind of like interior architectural significance. And I feel like I didn't want to overwhelm it. It was really, really important for me not to overwhelm the house with our stuff. And I think that part of that was in choosing a color palette where you would really find space for your eye to rest, and also fluidity, and also empty space and air. And, we have the luxury of that because it is a large house. I mean, our house in Brooklyn was crowded with the same furniture. And here it's kind of like this expanded version of that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. I think there's often a gut reaction. I've gotten this, so I'm projecting a little bit of sort of doing a more modern treatment with an old house. And I think you and I share a very similar philosophy of like, it's paint. It's, these things all change, furniture, lighting, but I think what you've done so effectively, and I really encourage people to go look at it, is through, I think, simplifying and creating that space that you're talking about, you've really let the house become an art piece of itself. And all of those details really show. And
Thank you.
I just think it's so beautiful and unique in this space of old home renovators and people kind of doing this work that I see on Instagram. So
yeah,
basically I'm just complimenting you.
Thank you very, very much.
Do you ever receive people who are displeased with what you've done?
Of course. I mean, at first, like on Instagram, people, I remember what you made that decision unfollowing. And I was like,
great.
Wow, that hurts. Now, not so much. But I think that we also made a real commitment to keeping and preserving everything that was old about the house. So it was only in the places where we're stewarding this 200-year-old house. Most of it is 200 years old. And I wish all of the old parts were here. They're not. So there were some really bad decisions that were made in the 90s. If you go back to our, what is it, on the top of Instagram where you have the story, the
highlights.
The
highlights, yeah.
Yeah, there are some pictures of before the renovation, and you can kind of, our bedroom had like this huge spa bathtub in the middle of the bedroom. I had to climb up this treacherous staircase, and it kind of looked like a Aztec, ceremonial ground. There were some very, very bad things that were just dated, and somebody's going to come along and do the same to what we did at some point. I think that we think it's great, but trends change and people see things differently. You just have to hope that nobody touches the original pieces. That we've all learned enough at this point to maintain as much of that as we can.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about stewardship for just a minute, because I'm curious how you feel about, you said you kept them as much old as you could, but
yeah. As
a designer, maybe you see things a little differently than just somebody who moves into a house. So when you want to make a change, what do you consider?
Well, we took down one wall in the kitchen. There's a back staircase in the kitchen, and it's the only room that's not bright in the house. And it was probably a servant's staircase at one point. So it's this narrow staircase. The staircase is beautiful. It's narrow and it has the beautiful banister, and it kind of hid the entrance to the basement. And we thought, if we open up this wall, we can expose the staircase and open up a window into the kitchen. So that just seemed like we weren't messing with the design integrity of the house. And doing so is just making the kitchen a little bit wider and brighter.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, because the other thing that happens all the time is people just tear out those staircases, because why do you need to? Very cool. Could you talk about your approach to the more modern? I know there's the kind of sunroom solarium on the back that was a much more modern addition, but you've now renovated that too, and it's quite a bit different than it was. And I'm interested.
Yeah, that is my least favorite part of the house. I love the idea of it. Like if we had an extra $1 million to throw around, I'd love to turn it into a glass box. What I don't love is that the windows, I think, don't represent the style of the house. It has these arched windows. And I think if it's not going to represent the house, let's make it super modern. It was built in 2003. And it wasn't insulated when we moved in. So it was always
from 2003,
really cold back there. It was really badly built. They put a fireplace in that doesn't work. Like we're either going to have to rebuild the entire chimney, or we learned that on Christmas Eve one night after we lit a big fire and we're having all these people over and the entire house filled out with smoke.
Oh gosh.
So I think that it was really an ill-considered and cheaply done addition. I would love to modernize, like make it more modern, because right now it just feels kind of suburban to me in a way. Not that there's anything wrong with the suburbs. It just doesn't feel like this is like a little old city house. So my choice would be to modernize it. It doesn't feel like it fits.
So it either needs to be, what did you say, really modern or to match the style of the old, but this in-between phase feels kind of like purgatory, design purgatory.
And we kind of did this very brutalist concrete, these stairs out of that room, and it would just be into the garden, and it would just kind of be nice to have it feel a little bit more structural and sculptural back there instead of what it is. But it works, and it's a lovely dining room. It's not quite where I wish it was.
Interesting. So as a designer too, let's talk about some of your inspiration. Do you always take it from other homes? What do you look for inspiration? What inspires you?
Oh, I think that probably not other homes. I'm always really taken by people's homes who have like a really unique point of view, whatever it is. If it doesn't feel out of the box or like something that was on a TV show, I'm always taken by it. But I would think that my inspiration comes more from art.
So if you see a piece, now this, I'm coming at you from someone who is not an artist, so I probably don't see things this way. And I just want to try to get a feel for what works in your brain. But let's say you go on vacation and you see a beautiful piece of art and it speaks to you in some way. It makes you happy, it makes you sad, it makes you uncomfortable, whatever. And it inspires something in you. Is that inspiration like the feeling that you use, or is the inspiration the colors that you saw? Like, how does that work in a designer's brain?
I think it's more just like, it's like an energy boost. It's so exciting. It's actually, I'm just going to retract that a little bit, because we were in London last year, and for the first time I went to see the Charleston House, the Bloomsbury Group house, which is where Duncan Grant and Vanessa Bell lived. And it was like this incredible artist community in the countryside of England. And it's been a dream of mine to see it for a very, very long time. And the last time I was in England, it wasn't open to the public, so I was never able to see it. So that was a huge inspiration to me early on. Like, they painted on the walls, they painted their furniture. And that's kind of something that I was doing in my 20s. We also saw John Soane's house in London, which is a magnificent house. Going to, the V&A is just endlessly inspiring. It's more just like a spark. And I think that when you see something that just totally surprises you that you've never seen before, it just gives you this incredible burst of energy. It's not so much like I want to take that and put it into what I do, but it's just like affirming in a way that there are all of these ideas and originals out there.
Right. And would you describe it almost like, when you say it's like a spark, like maybe you would come home and just be motivated to do something that you'd been kind of holding back on or thinking about, or
sure,
I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to get an idea of how the artist brain works, the designer brain works, because I am very linear. This is what I'm doing, this is what I'm fixing, this is how I've repaired it, and now I'm too exhausted to figure out how to make it look pretty.
I wish I had a little bit more of that. I'm so not linear. That's a wonderful thing to have.
I think, oh gosh, that creativity is a wonderful thing to have, and you think the linear thing. So I do. It just takes some time to develop those traits that aren't our strongest traits, probably.
It's a practice. It really is.
Sure.
Amy, this might be wrong, but I think it's the case that you move things around a ton. Is that true? Or have I made that up?
I move things like objects around?
Yeah, like your furniture and your art. It seems like your house always looks different, but maybe I'm looking at different angles. We can scratch this from the record if we need it.
No, you don't have to scratch. It's funny. It's funny that you said that, because I think my hobby as a kid was to rearrange the furniture. And I was a latchkey kid, and my parents would come home and like the living room was rearranged. And one of my favorite things was like to rearrange my bedroom and then wake up in the middle of the night and keep my eyes closed and try to remember where all the stuff, the room was, about 3.5 square feet. It was this tiny, tiny room. But I was like, where's my bed?
That's funny. Daniel and I were both room rearrangers. We've had this conversation before. Yeah,
graph
very
paper.
much. I had a real small room too. I figured out pretty early how to put the furniture. We had wood floors on a towel, so that I could just slide it around the room, and I'd be
you were
moving.
A good kid.
I had wall-to-wall carpet, so
did I.
You could really go for it.
Yeah.
I had a dad who would not put up with me not being a careful kid. So yes.
I had the wall-to-wall carpet too. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question that I've now forgotten.
Well, Amy was talking about moving things around. So is that something, do you like to move the art around? Does it bring fresh energy? I
think Jim would love to move the art around a lot more than I do. I get kind of used, I kind of knew exactly where the furniture was going to go without much, like the minute that I walked into this house, I was like, I'm building a corner sofa to go in that part of the living room. Like, so I had a real understanding about where I wanted to place things. And I get attached to looking at certain things when I'm walking through certain rooms. But we acquire art, and it's usually what we give each other for gifts. So we do have to rearrange some things right now.
I think a lot of your pieces you've either had for a long time or your parents had bought. Can you talk about their influence and like who were your parents and how did they have such great taste?
Oh, sure. It's an interesting story. My father was 10 years older than my mother and it was her second marriage. They both worked. She was a teacher. He had his own business. He was an executive headhunter and they were modernists. Like I always say, like I grew up in Don Draper's bachelor apartment when he moved out. Before they got married, my mother, she was a teacher. So she had her summers off and she had a summer job in the Catskills working at a restaurant at a resort. And she met these two men who were partners in life and in business who were just starting as interior designers. And she was their first client. Like they kind of became fast friends. And she brought them in. And it turns out I don't know their name. I should know their names because I don't really know what happened to them. But they did a beautiful job. And they had an apartment in Riverdale when they first got married. And it was super modern. And it was actually in House and Garden and in the New York Times. And they built and designed some furniture for them. And my parents' agreement was that my father would pay the rent and my mother would pay for the furniture and the designing. And that's what they did. So I have all of the mid-century pieces that I have are from their house. You know, I had no idea that this house was in our future and that we were going to have this amount of space because I ended up giving a lot of their things away. And I'm glad I gave things to, dear friends who cherished them. But we probably would have kept more if we had known that we were going to be moving into this much larger house.
Sure.
I've been thinking about this sort of a lot lately because for me, my family heirlooms are mid-century. We were Jewish immigrants around the turn of the century.
Hi.
Came with nothing. And I think this is a common thing with families that are maybe in their second or third generation in this country, or even first, obviously. But like the timeline is different. So I feel like my boyfriend, for instance, does not like my stuff. And it's because it's newer. And the thing that I constantly have to explain is like, I get that to you, it's sort of a new thing and it's unappealing. But to me, like that's my version of a 18th century armoire that, other people have. My family doesn't have stuff like that. It's funny because I sort of clocked that with you without actually knowing it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the heirlooms. And it's interesting because I think that when their pieces were all kind of, like American, like a lot of Paul McCobb and American mid-century pieces. And I always gravitated more towards like the Italian pieces, the little bit more glam pieces. But I am so happy. Every time I walk into the house, we have a library off to the right. And I have this big bookcase that was theirs. And I'm so happy to have it there. And it has this cat sculpture on it that one of my mother's students made for her. And their picture is on it. And it looks quite different than when they had all of their books on it. But it's so meaningful to me to have these pieces. And I think about them all the time.
I love that. We're lucky to have older generations that had great taste.
My people are farm people. So things that were meaningful to my family to pass down were like cedar chests and quilts and old metal wash tubs and things like that. Those were the kinds of things that were, if somebody passed that to you and it became yours, you're like, oh, that's really great. Because it was my entire family, both sides, very rural, not a lot of wealth by any means on either side, just farm people. It's fun for me to listen to you talk about how meaningful the mid-century stuff is because that's something new. I had not heard that before. So thank you for having that conversation.
Of course. I'll talk about anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think it's something we don't think that much about is like, we all think about the big, beautiful armoire, the crazy Victorian bed or whatever as being heirloom. And I think we need to expand that definition because it doesn't include a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the mix. I mean, for me, it's really important to have that balance where it's not all just one thing. I mean, I gravitate a lot towards, modern upholstery, but old cabinets. So there's a lot of, it's somewhat eclectic.
Sure.
In that mix up.
Do you have any tips or any tricks or things that how you bring the old and new together and make it look good together?
I really think it's, if you love it, there's a common denominator there on if you truly love something, if you truly love three things, they're going to work together. And I think that a lot of it is just being very, very honest with yourself and not bringing it in because you saw it on a TV show or a magazine or something, but because it speaks to your heart. I think that's what makes things work more than anything.
I love that point of view.
I think also what makes houses feel loved is when it's clear that the person, whether it's your style or not, like when it's clear that it's somebody's expression of sort of who they are, I think that is valuable and very cool.
I think so too. And I think that I'm a big believer in slow design and acquiring things slowly and feeling your environment. And, my house is a result of decades of collecting and gathering and eliminating. I mean, they say that the first half of your life is about acquiring and the second half is about editing.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
That resonates.
And it's, again, part of its stewardship. And you get to a point, too, where you feel like it's all living very, very happily together. I don't know. It's very, very rare these days that I will buy something for myself. But if I do, I know it immediately. It's like I have to have, even if it's this little tiny thing that costs $3, it's mostly, I'll pass on most things. And I love buying things for other people for their homes. That's all great. But for myself, it's just having that feeling that you're meant to be with this object for a while.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That really puts it in perspective. When this conversation is over, I'm going to go and I'm going to sit and think about it a lot because to me, it's a new way of looking at things or maybe a realization that this is what I've been trying to do, but haven't quite gotten there. And as you were talking about that, when you find something that you love it, like I remember being out on my own when I was first leaving home, which was quite a while ago. And, everything that I bought, I just remember just absolutely loving it, thinking like this, I need to have this. This is going to be great. And, I could look around wherever I was living and sort of point to it and feel that little, like, I love this. And now I feel like it's just different. After a while, you kind of get to the point where I kind of look around and I have that because there is a space for it. And so I had to fill the space and therefore I bought the thing or acquired the thing to put in that space. But, do I love everything I have? Absolutely not. Would I, if it was all gone tomorrow, except for a handful of things, I'd probably be fine. So I hadn't thought about that in a very long time.
Well, that's where tag sales are really good.
Well, Stacy also has a move on the horizon, and I feel like that really forces your editing.
Do you like how I've turned this interview all about me?
No, you haven't at all.
It's a huge relief.
Yeah, just a lot of things to think about these days. Go ahead, Daniel.
I just wanted to add maybe my final question. Now we know the origin story of the name Lavender Ghost, but I will ask anyway, is the house haunted?
It's not haunted. It's very interesting because it was just the minute that I walked in, the energy felt incredible. But after we had bought the house, we had a woman who, Daniel, you probably know Emily Major because everybody in the Hudson Valley knows Emily. She's like the window whisperer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I heard window and whisper. So explain, please.
She did my friend's windows.
She did. We have like 60 windows and none of them opened or shut when we bought the house. Yes. And they're all single pane, wavy glass. They're amazing, but it's a little cold. So she did her magic with our windows. And she also was taken by the house and she kind of did a dossier because she's also a closet historian. So she sent us a dossier on the house, and it turned out that there was an enslaved woman that lived in this house. And when Jim and I heard that, we were so upset. We were so incredibly upset. We really shouldn't have been surprised because there absolutely was slavery in the Hudson Valley and especially in the bigger houses. But there were two censuses, and one was while it named all of the people except that she was listed as like female slave. And then a few years later, it was freed female slave. So she was the only one who was listed without a name and without an age. It was devastating. It was really, but the question was, are there ghosts in the house? I never feel any bad energy, but she's like the ghost in my heart, in my brain, around like darkness that happened here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, I think that's something a lot of us have to come to terms with. Like, I was thinking about it a ton this past fall when I was working on my front porch, which is not very big, but it has a lot of like ornamentation. And by the end, I sort of had this feeling of like, number one, having a lot more kind of understanding of when I see those elements disappear off of old houses, you know, just sort of the reality of how much time and money would have to be invested to actually repair those things.
Yeah.
But also the realization that a house like this to be built sort of hinges on, at the very least, exploited labor. And, you know, how do you, I don't know, come to terms with that, I think is hard. And I think a lot of us maybe choose to do it by trying to preserve the house and honor it if it had to come out of these somewhat horrific circumstances a lot of the time. Like, we should preserve it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the least we can do is care for this thing that somebody else was forced to build. Yeah, I get that.
Or severely underpaid or not paid at all.
Sure.
Yeah. It's sort of, they either were insanely wealthy or had extremely cheap labor. And I think the cheap labor is probably more true for my house. And it's interesting.
Yeah, I do think about that sometimes too, because this house was built with, you know, servants' quarters, clearly servants' quarters. I do know that right after it was built, it was sold. So I don't actually know whether anybody used that in that way, but yeah, kind of interesting. Not interesting, good. I just mean there's a lot to unpack for sure.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to you saving that staircase is like, you've saved that part of the narrative of the house because that's probably the staircase that person used.
If she was lucky enough to actually be sleeping in the house.
In the house, right.
You know, you just don't know.
What year is your house? I should know this.
It's 1820. Well, we have a piece of glass that says 1820. So it's on records, it's like between 1820 and 1836. But I think that just going back to what you were saying, I think it's not ghosts so much, but it's just like kind of reimagining. I mean, I see myself running around this house in like sweatpants and, you know, fuzzy slippers. And you just imagine like what this was like in 1820, what this was like in 1920, it's just, I have a mirror over our fireplace that I bought from a wonderful dealer who I love. And she said, Amy, just imagine how many faces have looked in that mirror. And that's the kind of thing that just gives me the shivers. It's like how many hands have gone down this banister? How many kids have run through these hallways? And these places have such incredible unknown history. And I think that, you know, going back to what you were saying, Stacy, it's like it is up to us to preserve it. You know, I think that, you know, Jim is a big tree hugger and he feels guilty all the time for living in this, you know, big, huge house that is energy inefficient. And we put solar panels on the roof to try to be responsible towards that. And we try to do the best we can. But when you live with these single pane windows and heat is escaping out of everywhere, it's hard. But yeah, I think that it's a matter of honoring the history and doing the best you can in the best way possible to preserve it and hire people at a fair wage to do work that you need to have done and try to just be better, right?
Yeah. Well, this is a great place, I think, to end for today. Thank you, Amy, for being here. This has been a very interesting and thought-provoking conversation. And I'm dead serious when I say we're going to hang up here and I'm just going to be kind of like rolling all of this around in my brain, probably for days. So thank you for giving all of us something to think about.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Amy. What a pleasure.
Yeah. If people want to follow you or find you and hire you for your services, how can they do that?
My Instagram is the Lavender Ghost, one word. And my website is amyilias.com. You can reach me, find me through both of those.
Perfect. We'll put those in the show notes. Thanks again, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
I had no idea that Amy lived close to you.
Yeah, I have known Amy's house longer than I've known her. And just a hop, skip, and a jump.
Wow. Do you think you'll go visit or just like sit in her driveway and be weird or what? What are you going to do?
Both. I would say both. Yeah. I'm in the driveway right now.
I'm sure she'd love to see you in person. All right. Well, thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to our guest, Amy Ilias. This show would not be possible without the generous support of the Window Course, Sutherland Wells, Repaint Studios, and Old House Hub.
As always, to continue the conversation, check out the video version of this show on YouTube and visit us on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses. You can follow myself at Daniel Cantor or Stacy at Blake Hill House.
In next week's minisode, we'll chat about what's going on in our lives, and probably there'll be a rabbit hole or two, hopefully related to old house life. Until next time.
See you on the other side.